Welcome to another brand new episode of Between Two Berms. The podcast is about all things Omaha Storm Chasers related and sometimes completely unrelated. I am your host, Scott, here with my co-host, Andrew.
Hello, how you doing?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. I feel like we've got a nice podcast up here.
Yeah, we off to a good start. Got some fan engagement already, some comments made, so looking to only get bigger and better from here.
Hopefully you guys liked the first two episodes. We didn't go super deep in any of those, but eventually we'll get it going.
Definitely more baseball centric this next one.
Most definitely. Tell us about this upcoming episode. What do we got here?
Yeah, so I was able to reach out, get a hold of Cody Tapp, the pre and post game host for the Royals radio broadcast on 610 Sports Radio in Kansas City. I love listening to him. Obviously, we're from Kansas City and listen to him quite a bit on radio and on some of their talk shows. Great personality, great follow on Twitter. Cody B. Tapp with 2 P's. And, yeah, he's just a great guest.
Yeah, he's very insightful, knows a lot about the Royals, certainly a lot more than I do.
Definitely more than me.
Oh, yeah. All right, we want to add a disclaimer here as well. The audio is how you say bad.
Garbage.
Very bad. We thought we had it figured out, but we clearly did not. So we are working on that. We're going to make sure it is perfect for you guys for the upcoming interviews and episodes we have. But just as a disclaimer, it is not great.
There's still some good stuff in this interview, so if you want to power through, and there's some great little nuggets in there, especially as we're getting close to winter meetings here and with the new ownership group. So hopefully you stick around and listen to it. But again, we have some upcoming podcasts that we're very excited about.
All right, without further ado, here is Cody Tapp.
All right, so I guess what do you do for 610 exactly, covering the Royals? What's the basics of what you're doing down there?
Well, right now, nothing, right?
Yeah.
No baseball means no work.
Season.
But, the job, it kind of starts up here in, I guess, a little over a couple of months because I'll spend, part of my responsibilities, obviously, at the beginning of January, I'll start doing hot stove shows where we talk about the Royals kind of leading up to the beginning of spring training. And then I spend 6 weeks living in Arizona. And then the rest of the year, and that entails doing shows there and interviewing players and kind of doing some video content as I see fit. But then once the season starts, it's pre and post and cover a team every day. So covering a team every day is, getting as much information about as many topics as you can, as well as kind of getting ready for the daily challenge of doing a pre and a post game show. Now the post games kind of speak for themselves because games happen and then you react. But pregame always involves, trying to decide how you want to look at the team that day or what topic about the team you want to get into. And so there's a lot of building and trying to get to know both the major league side and then obviously with you guys, try to get to know the minor leaguers who might be up here soon or that I might need to know soon and kind of sorting through that as well.
So what kind of goes into how you decide each topic each day? Does it mostly depend on the day before if there's any big call-ups? What goes into deciding?
Well, some of the days are easier than others, right? Like if Nicky Lopez gets called up and I'm going to have when we do the walk-off, which is, we do lineups and starting pitching and all that stuff kind of sorts itself out in pregame. But the walk-off, the final segment of my pregame allows me to kind of dive into any topic. And so that's where I'm trying to choose something I want to discuss today. Sometimes it's more researched and it's about like a certain hitter's either good or bad performance. And you're trying to break down why that might not be working. But then other times it's just about, it's simple. Like Nicky Lopez is getting called up. Let me tell you about Nicky Lopez. Let me tell you who he is or what type of player he is or where he came, Mm-hmm. So some of it just kind of depends on it. Some of it is natural and very easy to decide. That's the thing you're going to get into. And then occasionally there are games you're like, what's the thing people care about or are talking about or might be interesting? So, it really does vary just kind of on the day.
It's kind of a grind being the pre and post game show for the Royals being throughout the entire baseball season.
Sure.
You kind of get some time off in season. Obviously now is the off season. You're not doing as much, but in the season, do you kind of get a week here or there that you kind of can get away?
No, I worked 159 games. I took 3 off. So I took 1 off for my daughter's 3rd birthday. I took 1 off for my son's 1st birthday. And I took 1 off for a wedding. That was the end of the list. So I worked 159 games. People don't realize that baseball schedule obviously is 162 games.
Right.
And it's played in about 184 days, 185 days. And the 6 weeks of spring training leading up to the season, I think I had 2 days off in spring training just based on off schedule. So I worked the 6 weeks there plus the whole season. And there were like, I don't know, maybe in season, 20 total off days plus the 3 I took, right? Or 25 plus those 2. It's probably less than 30 off days from mid-February to the end of September.
So what you're saying is you enjoy the off season.
Yeah, it's good. I don't, you do kind of get used to, it's a grind. And anybody who works in baseball will tell you that. Writers, radio guys, TV, whoever. Right. So, but you do kind of hit a groove with it eventually. But there are always, I think with anybody who works, there's grind moments where you're like, oh, don't want to talk about Royals White Sox today. I'd be all right. Like you root for rainouts or at least rain shortened games. You're like, I could take a day.
Yeah,
a day would be okay.
I would say we have similar situations here at the start of series. There's a few 9-10 game homestands where we're like, it's okay if we have a day that gets rained and postponed to a doubleheader.
And because I don't travel, road games are way easier. Like a home game, I leave the house at 1:30. I get to the stadium at 2. Then I work on my pregame until 3 because I had little kids at home, so I couldn't work on pregame at home all that easily. Mm-hmm. So I'll work on the pregame till 3:30. Then the clubhouse will open, and then we'll talk to Ned. Or now we'll talk to Mike.
Yeah.
We'd go down and talk to Ned, and then I head back upstairs. And if there was anything left to finish on my pregame, which there always wasn't, then I'd have about an hour or so in between before pregame would go start. So it's like I needed that amount of time to get everything done, and then you do post. So I'd get to the stadium at 2, and I'd probably, I'd leave after a game after post game. So maybe 11:30 or midnight, and then a road game. I don't have to. There's no players to talk to. There's no manager to talk to. Right. All that time that I'd spend doing that, I just stayed home a little longer.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to miss some of those exchanges between you and Ned. Ned always had fun with the media, but especially the 6'10 guys, he always liked to have a little bit more with.
It'll be interesting to see how Matheny handles it, I guess, since Ned and I certainly had a certain type of rapport. So it'll be interesting to know how Mike Matheny and I guess get along on that front.
Well, speaking of Mike, obviously he was just hired recently from the point that we recorded this podcast. What do you think he's going to bring to the table? Obviously, some of us are familiar with what he did in St. Louis. Some of them, some negative reports, maybe some perspective that might have been too harsh on him. But what's kind of been your perspective? Obviously, you've been on air at 610 Sports Radio in Kansas City talking about it a little bit, but kind of tell some of the Omaha fans up here what they might expect out of Mike and how he's a little bit different from when he was in St. Louis.
Yeah, I think, his press conference was really good. It was encouraging. And if he's changed some of the things that people might consider negatives about him in his time in St. Louis, then he has a long place to grow. I think what the organization likes about him the best is that he was a winner.
Yeah.
He won. I know that, it's boy, it really went bad in St. Louis. It did in the end. And it seems like things kind of unraveled and clubhouse issues were part of the concern, which would obviously be a bad thing if it were to come to Kansas City. But he won. He had 100 wins, 4 consecutive seasons. He won a World Series to open his managerial career in St. Louis. It just, the second Pujols left, and then the roster wasn't quite the same collection, and Cardinals fans are used to a lot of winning. When they started to dip into that 80s, 90s win swell, which isn't that low, but when they started to fall back, things unraveled on him. So I guess the concern always is that, can he handle the struggle? And I don't think that this year's good. Now, handling the struggle when you struggle at the beginning and then build up, it's probably a little different than you were in a World Series, 100 win, and now it's starting to hurt.
Right.
So I think from a positive standpoint, he won a lot. He seemed like, the veteran players really liked him. And he said he's been working on how to handle young players better, which was a criticism of him in St. Louis. But that's all kind of to be seen. I think that I know they said they didn't really make the decision until Ned was gone, but I think the second they brought him in, the thought was, he was a real chance and a real thought of the managerial stuff. Well, plus, it's just, it'll be just, I just don't know that we know because of the way it went down for Ned and everything. I just don't think we know how it'll go.
Right. And
speaking of the new manager, John Sherman and the new ownership groups coming in this year. Do you think any changes are going to happen from where they were with David Glass or anything like that?
I think that's probably going to be officially announced here soon, the new ownership stuff. It sounds like the coaching staff's going to all kind of stay the same, and the management staff, at least for the time being, will be kind of similar, although something's going to have to replace the role that Dan Glass was still doing organizationally, right? That's why we always kind of thought Dayton would eventually take a promotion to like Dan's old job and then a new GM in name. You know how it is. Like organizations have made that move to like the Billy Bean or Theo Epstein roles of you're the forward-facing person who everyone assumes making decisions, but there's actually a general manager underneath you. So I could see something like that going down. I don't think it'll happen this year, but I could see something like that going down in the future if John Sherman's happy with the job Dayton does. Other than that, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's going to be massive overhaul in any sense. I think this first couple of years are going to be a lot of him feeling out what it's like to be, just the owner, not a minority owner like he was in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Kind of dive into the hot stove a little bit. Obviously, it's a little bit early for your show and some of the subject matters that you might have, but winter meetings is coming up. I had the opportunity to attend winter meetings when I was job searching in 2016. I was in Washington, D.C. for that. But it was a really cool experience to be searching for a job, but also like you're on Radio Row, you're seeing all these on-air personalities, and it's like the Joe Maddens of the world are stopping, talking to job searchers, and it's pretty cool atmosphere to be a part of. But kind of what are some of your expectations when it comes to the winter meetings? What kind of moves do you think the Royals might make? And, are they looking, as they move ahead in the rebuild, to kind of bring in some veterans? Are they looking to pay their own players? I've heard some different strategies thrown around there and be interested to hear your take on it.
Well, I don't think they're going to be big spenders in free agency. And I'm not sure they should be. We actually had this conversation in the air the other day. I think when people hear John Sherman's not going to spend on free agency, they go back to that old he's cheap. You won't spend. And you're like, no, don't waste free agency money when you're not ready to compete.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and when you're getting close, if you want to sign multi-year deals, then okay. But, cheap or mid-priced free agent deals for 1 or 2 years don't make any sense for the Royals right now. I do think they'll spend on their own. So Hunter Dozier still needs to be locked up, and so does Jorge Soler, you would think. And at some point, you probably want to have conversations with both Brad Keller and Adalberto Mondesi. And so I think that's where the spending's coming here for them very soon. The biggest thing, but winter meetings have nothing to do with that. Their biggest two things at winter meetings are they going to trade Witt or are they going to trade Ian Kennedy? People thought they'd move Ian Kennedy at the deadline, but he was owed so much money and only so many teams wanted to take on the remainder or a large remainder of that salary. Winter meetings makes a lot of sense. For teams in the bullpen market, a full year of Ian Kennedy at his price, even if they eat some of it, it's not that bad. It doesn't take that much to purchase him for a single year, then you can make your decision. And he was one of the better relievers in baseball last year. And Witt, the constant talking point for the Royals, is the guy that I think a bunch of teams would be super interested in, but the Royals price tag is going to be incredibly high, and it should be.
Yeah.
They should get everything they want and more for Witt if they're actually going to make those moves. So I think the winter meetings will be bigger in those categories than anything else. Those two players and what they're going to do with them moving forward.
Well, I think Whit Merrifield, he obviously has some ties here in Omaha, mostly for the College World Series and his performance there. But every year he was one of those grinders. Every year he got better and better. And, when he finally made it with the Royals and got his chance, he kind of grasped onto that and showed up and showed out and has really been kind of the core of this team. I don't know if he's a clubhouse leader or not, if you've seen some of those things, but it's pretty obvious face of the franchise right now, minus maybe Mondesi or Perez.
Well, he is a really difficult player to replace. Mm-hmm. So if you really think as an organization you're going to trade him, this is the type of player that teams that want to win World Series always look to acquire or to get or to have on their team. I would not be in a hurry to move Witt. He's cost controlled and he's an incredibly good player, and he's the first righty to lead the league hits back-to-back years since the 80s. It just doesn't like he matters a lot. And he is a leader in the clubhouse, by the way. I'd say that corner, if Alex Gordon doesn't come back, but I it's starting to sound like he will.
Yeah.
Gordon is kind of the leader of one side of the clubhouse when Salvador Perez has been the leader of the other side. But Witt certainly falls right into that grouping, the leadership grouping. And so, you'd be replacing a lot if you let Witt go.
Unless you're blown away, I don't see a reason to trade him away for no reason.
Yeah, and he plays so many different positions. I think that's invaluable. To me, he just kind of reminds me of an Alex Gordon who maybe performs a little bit better when we're talking about transition periods. Whether Gordon comes back or not, I hope he does. Obviously, one of the greatest Royals of all time. But it seems like Witt could be that person in this transition with Mike Matheny and this rebuild to kind of get everything together and lead this franchise moving forward.
Well, and Witt's just like the huge chip on the shoulder guy. So he just, like, for anybody who like doubts themselves, Witt is not that. Like, put me anywhere, I'll play. Put me in I'll perform. Like, I'm going to make this work no matter what I do. And so that really is invaluable for a number of reasons. And, it's easier to have a transition if you have a good lineup. If you have a good team, if you have good players, and the Royals do that, like Dozier, Mondesi, Witt.
Very true. All right, a little more Storm Chasers centric. There's a lot of big pitching prospects. Compared to what we've had in the past, like Singer, Coar, Lynch. Do you see any of those guys coming up through Omaha or even to the majors this year? What do you see on that front?
So I always wonder. Here's the thing. I actually do see him going through there because I keep trying to. Talk to people in the organization, front office guys, and I'm like, hey, you guys just think about skipping Omaha? Yeah. It's so hard to pitch there. It's just so hard to pitch in that park.
Anybody I talk to. Windy, the wind blows out to left. It's if a player gets a hold of one, and there's no doubter usually.
Just the PCL in general.
We've seen it go over our home run porch in the Sun Valley party patio out here, and it bounces around back in the locker room areas. It's tough to pitch. You're right.
I think it was Stamont who told me he's like the first like 3 balls that got hit off of him at Coffin, he's like, I thought they were gone. Yeah. Like he just got used to it. He's like, they were just like medium depth fly balls. You're like, yeah, that sounds right. So I kept like kind of joking with him, like, maybe it would be detrimental to make them pitch in a park that would be really difficult to pitch in. Maybe they wouldn't be the same level of aggressive, but I don't think anybody makes as big of a deal about it as I do. So I would think that Singer and Coar you would definitely see this year. Lynch, unfortunately, because of his injury, he got knocked back, that year of development. Now I could see him flying through double. I bet he starts at double A because he finished strong at single A this year and then could find his way into triple A along the way. But those would be the 3 with Daniel Tillo, the relief arm that I could see going through Omaha this year. The rest, it's not impossible that Bubic, who was their minor league pitcher of the year, would see some time through there. But those are the 3 that are already the highest, getting through the order stuff. And I expect to get at least some time at AAA.
Well, speaking of Bubic, I think there was some maybe some lesser known prospects pitching wise this past year in the organization that kind of exceeded expectations and actually pitched better than some of the big names like Singer and Coar. But yeah, I could potentially, do you think they could get pushed through the system like some of these other guys and be a part of that same core, the championship cores that keep winning championships together as they move along?
Pitching prospects, it's like if you have 5 of them, you have 1, I think is the statement, or if you have 4, you have 1. And so some will move slower. What'll happen is, like we mentioned, Coar, Singer, and Lynch. Someone will have some struggle that moves them slower. Mm-hmm. And they'll just get stalled out in a level for a little bit while they try to sort through it. That's just like how these things go, right? And so while it seems like, Bubic or somebody should probably find their way into AAA at some point this season, because we expect Bubic, who dominated all single A, he was at 2 levels at single A. We would then expect him to be in double A to start the year. This year, typically, because the Royals usually like to honor the 1 year at each, like a full season at each level, if you're like a normal progressing prospect. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're college guys, which is the other part of like getting them there faster, right? Bubic went to Stanford. It's a college guy. So they try to move those guys through the system a little bit quicker because of how much time they've already put in. They're not 18. You think
Right.
you think a year each when they're like 18. It's
A
different.
little bit more wear on that arm.
Yeah. So I kind of expect of those, because there are 7 or 8 names that pitched really well for KC this year. I kind of expect maybe half of them to find their way to AAA at some point this year. And I definitely expect a few of them to make their way to the majors. Singer, Kowar, Lynch, Tillo, Bubic, maybe, and even like guys that don't get mentioned as much, like Carlos Hernandez, who struggled but then found his way, who could end up in the bullpen.
What about position players? Who are the big position players that might be coming through?
For you, for AAA, it's Khalil Lee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because if Gordon comes back,
him and Nick Heath seem like pretty interchangeable players. Nick Heath obviously made it up with the Storm Chasers towards the end of the season, and then he unfortunately had a wrist injury. But we were kind of waiting for Khalil Lee a little bit, and he never showed up, and we were kind of wondering what was happening there.
Well, I thought he was gonna, I would tell you that I had heard he was gonna be up at AAA, but then things changed, and then he went through a rut. And then he just kind of, remember we're talking about like pitchers a little bit like that, just kind of stalled at that level for a little bit. But if Gordon comes back, there's not an immediate spot for Lee.
Yeah.
Because they're going to give that early time to Bubba Starling and Brett Phillips. And, they'll already have Gordon out there, and maybe they'll give Dozier some more time in right. And so the outfield is going to be a bit crowded if Gordon comes back, which means I think Khalil Lee will start at AAA. I assume that he'd be the guy you'd see from jump at that level. And I'd be surprised, I guess, if he did. Nick Heath, too, obviously. He already got bumped to AAA and should have maybe even a little sooner. He was performing so well at that time. He's also incredibly likable, by the way. If you haven't had a chance to talk to Nick Heath, he's great.
I had the pleasure of being down in the dugout quite a few times, and he confiscated a camera at one point and was taking photos for an entire game. But definitely a personality, and I follow him on Twitter as well, and definitely a likable guy. A guy who doesn't believe in undershirts, believes in the deep V with his jersey as well. He's an athlete. He shows it. So,
the speed game, those two guys in running would certainly not be boring by any stretch. But the other big names, like the other big position player names, are all at the lower levels for the Royals, and I'm just not sure how quickly each are going to kind of move up through there. They got a lot of other guys they've acquired through trade. Mm-hmm. That you would think are coming through AAA right now that could be kind of fast risers that end up being bench players in the early going for the Royals or full time. But I don't see, they got several guys that you like, but the two big names are probably, like you mentioned, Heath and Khalil Lee.
Well, and obviously the Royals kind of took most of our outfield last year.
Sure did.
Whether it's by need or for injuries or whatnot. But obviously Bubba Starling and Brett Phillips kind of filled those roles for us for the majority of the year. And then when they got called up, we had to find a few minor leaguers out there to sign and bring off the street because we were lacking in that area for sure.
Catching depth, too, where you start going like, well, we need somebody to catch because we've had to borrow too many.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a struggle. I think we had at least 4 different injuries with catchers last year, so that was rough on Holberg here.
And that could be, I know that they've been like, MJ Melendez didn't have a good hitting year or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised if like Valoria and Melendez and just kind of depending on how they sort out all of their catching going forward, if we wouldn't see somebody like that sneak up too, because the guys that I would, you would hope would be in AAA by now have had injuries. Like Kyle Isbell is really polished, has been stuck at A-ball because he's been hurt. He would have certainly been in AA, no question, and then probably started AAA this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come through. Or Gigliotti, right? They just had some of the other outfielders that AAA might, Omaha might want to see. Injuries have just kind of slowed the progress. Not stopped it, but slowed the progress from getting there.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of speaking of some of those Omaha Storm Chasers players and being up with the Royals, can you recall any fun stories maybe on their first day with the Royals? Or obviously we have some of those local guys who've been around a while or have that Omaha tie between Bubba Starling, Nicky Lopez, or even Dini, kind of his first time up in the majors this year as well.
Dini's moment was incredible. It was a lot of fun watching him just kind of get those, like all of his family being there on the road, and those kinds of scenes were incredible. One of my favorite of all those guys, of just like a story, was like it's disappointing, right, for them, but it was just one of those like, oh, come on, like Bubba Starling, who obviously grew up in Kansas City, like you guys talked about, spent all this time in Omaha and trying to get through and break through the majors. And he hit his first career home run on the road, right at Fenway.
Mm-hmm.
And, they get him the ball and they frame it up and it looks great. And then it's maybe it takes a little while. So it's like a week or two later. So maybe people aren't thinking about it. He hit his first career home run at Kaufman. And nobody got it. Nobody got the ball. So he never got it. They don't know where it is. And so I'd asked him, I was like, hey man, because it was like 2 nights later. I was like, hey, did you get that ball? I was like, you grew up watching Kaufman. I mean, did you get that ball? He's like, no. He was like, I bet they just didn't think about it. It wasn't my first career home run ball. I was like, yeah, but it was your first one at Kaufman. He's like, yeah, man, I know. I was like, that's the stadium you grew up with. I'm like, oh, I feel so bad.
That's crazy.
That could have been it. Like, oh no. Like between that, because Nicky's best thing was when we were up there in Omaha anyway, because his first career home run came in Omaha, which was kind of incredible just based on he went to college there and then was at the Royals AAA affiliate in Omaha. It was like, it seemed like a few rookies had some like really cool moments. I know Bubba Starling was disappointed he didn't get that home run ball, but the idea that he finally got to hit one in his home stadium and then everyone's like, oh, you probably want that ball. Because it was like his 4th career home run, so it didn't stand out in any way, but it was his first one at Kaufman.
Yes.
It didn't stand out.
That's a big one.
Yeah. When you grow up in Kansas City, I'd say so. I will tell you that Josh Staumont, when he got called up too, Alex Gordon did spend like a month calling him Billy, like from Stranger Things. So he was just calling him Billy.
That's
so. I guess he was watching it with his wife at that time. Alex was, so just struck. He does kind of look like Billy from Stranger Things. It's not way off. It's
with that mustache, he definitely does. I can't argue that. Staumont, I don't know if you know this or not, but a big dog guy. So anytime you sit down with him, get to know him a little bit. And, he loved the bark in the parks out here at Warner Park, getting to see all the dogs and seeing some of the pit bulls. So.
We were lucky enough he was one of my, when I do the 30-minute one-on-one interviews, he actually was one. And we talked a lot about him and his wife drove out of state to go get a pit bull because in the state you're in Nebraska, it's fine. You can have a pit bull, but like a state over, I think maybe they went to Iowa, like they go to kill shelters. And he's like, nope, we're going to go out of our way to get a pit bull from there to make sure that it's safe. So yeah, he's a big fan.
You can find Cody on Twitter at Cody B Tapp. Obviously, he's the pregame and postgame host for the Royals shows there on 610 Sports Radio.
Thanks for joining us, Cody.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
One of our first special guests that we've had on here, and couldn't have thought about a better one, honestly. It's been a great conversation for the Storm Chasers and about the Royals and getting some Omaha fans caught up on where the Royals are. And when it comes to winter meetings and new ownership, new manager, just a lot going on in Kansas City.
Yeah, busy. Although I'm going to try to enjoy the offseason a little while longer, I hope.
Good. You need to.
Again, if you follow him on Twitter, some great pics of his kids. They're highly entertaining, it seems like.
They are. They're a colorful bunch at the very least.
Awesome. Thanks, Cody.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed that interview with Cody. I think he had a lot to say about the Royals and the upcoming season.
I know I sure did. A lot of insight there, like we said. Hopefully you powered through. And yeah, if you want to find Cody again, I know we plugged him there towards the end, but you can also hear him on his own podcast, Tapping the Plate. Long-form interviews, one-on-one interviews, about 30 minutes long on the 610 Sports Radio 435 podcast network. So feel free to just go to 610sportsradio.com. You can find it there. And be sure and follow us on Twitter, OMA Storm Chasers, and Omaha Storm Chasers on everything else, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for all those youths.
Make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to. You can now find us on our website, of course. We also are on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, pretty much anywhere you could possibly think of. We are there. Let us know if you have a topic suggestion, and we'll consider it and then probably use it if it's not terrible. More important than all that, make sure you tune in again next time for a brand new episode of Between Two Berms.